back. WN bye-week period around here, and certainly a busier week down in the Queen City. Dan Hoard does all things Cincinnati Bengals as well as Bearcats from time to time. He's a busy cat this time of the year, whether it's the Bengals or the Bearcats. And certainly this is the time of the year where Bengals fans say, when's our turn to win a Super Bowl? And certainly on the backside of really an annihilation at the hands of the Saints over the weekend, the Bengals picking up the pieces. Marvin has fired Terrell Austin, who we know around here. And as much as we have our own problems with quarterbacks and coaches and where our future is, the Bengals have similar issues. Dan, welcome in from Cincinnati. It's two organizations here licking some wounds right now as we both look up and see the Pittsburgh Steelers doing what they do on an annual basis.
It's disgusting, isn't it?
It is. It really is, yeah.
Drives us crazy here in Cincinnati. But, yeah, the Bengals have definitely hit a rough stretch over their last 4 games. Their defense is historically bad. At this point of the season, they are giving up the most yards of any team in the NFL, and on a pace to give up the most in NFL history. They're also on a pace to shatter the team record for most points allowed in a season. So it has not been good.
The thoughts about Marvin coming in the middle of a season and making a change. I mean, Harbaugh made a change here. We won a Super Bowl with Cam Cameron years ago. We had a lot of conjecture around here about John Harbaugh's future and whether he was going to be fired during bye week. I said that's something that Steve Bisciotti wouldn't do, is make those kind of changes. But I think when you make those kind of changes, when your defense has been kicked around as much as it is, I don't think there's anybody in the sport that doesn't like Terrell Austin. And obviously Marvin was excited to bring him in. At one point, he almost got a head coaching job in the league. It is amazing how you're 3 weeks away from not doing what you used to do in this league when a unit goes sour.
Yeah, they had reached the point where he had to do something. The defense, you could just tell they were hopeless. They were desperate. They didn't think they had a chance, and they haven't over the last several weeks. 51 to the Saints last week. They scored on their first 9 possessions and took a knee on the 10th. 34 to the Bucks the game before when the Bengals jumped out to a 21-point lead in the first half. 45 to the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football where they were not competitive. So this was a team that got off to a great start. Optimism was high. Things seemed to be humming along. And since they gave up a late lead to the Steelers 4 games ago in a game that looked like they had won, it has been disastrous ever since. So he had to do something, and he pulled the plug on Terrell Austin.
It's like whack-a-mole, right? Like, I mean, you get your offense right and your defense falls apart. Last year was all about the offensive line and Whitworth and guys leaving and all, and Zeitler amongst others. And now this year it's about the defense, where we saw the defense play on the Thursday night. It certainly looked like they could get after Joe Flacco. They could stop the run. But the speed and I guess the age of the defense has sort of caught up a little bit.
Well, more than anything else, the linebacker position has been dreadful, and part of that is due to injury. Vontaze Burfict has only played in a couple of games, and the 2 games he played in, he didn't play particularly well. Nick Vigil, the one guy at that position who has played well, has been injured and has missed the last several games, and everybody else that is lined up at linebacker has just been atrocious. Now, Preston Brown, in fairness to him, suffered a pretty bad ankle injury early this year that he has tried to play through. I'll give him credit for running out there every week, but he's played very ineffectively. And then the other young linebackers that they've been trotting out there have just been killing them. So they're still solid up front. I think the secondary is okay, but the middle of that defense is just getting gashed repeatedly by tight ends and running backs out of the backfield.
We are aware of across the middle the last couple of weeks as we've lost a lot of football games to loose running tight ends running through our secondary. We remember Tyler Eifert, and I know he's a little bit of a blip in the Bengals, radar, in and out and injured and all that stuff. But every time he was on the field, we noticed him. Where's the offense right now, Dan? And I haven't seen the Bengals play in a couple of weeks just because of my schedule, their schedule, where we've been, where they've been. But I was kind of astonished to see this thing fall apart. I thought they were in for the long haul. I really did.
The offense has been inconsistent, but generally it's been good enough. The Bengals are 11th in the NFL in scoring at 26 points a game, so that's obviously good enough to keep you in contention. But they've had hot and cold spells, and part of that is due to injury. Now, A.J. Green is out. You mentioned Tyler Eifert. He's done for the rest of the year. Joe Mixon missed a couple of games. The offensive line is beat up right now, so you hate to blame everything on injuries, but it's a legitimate factor at least. And I think when healthy, it's a very good offense, but it's not healthy right now.
He is Dan Hoard. He is the voice of the Cincinnati Bengals. He'll be calling the action here in Baltimore. We'll make sure he doesn't get tourist crab cakes on the way in here. My friends in Cincinnati always give me the good chili with the cinnamon when I'm out there. Andy Dalton and putting the band back together and Marvin coming back, and I know how the Brown family feels about Marvin, but this has been as challenging a year for Marvin as I think he's had at this point, because I think expectations did start to skyrocket a little bit in September and into October. And to have these injuries at this point, how's Marvin doing through all of this?
Marvin doesn't like to fire friends. I guess no coach does. So I think whacking Terrell Austin 9 games into his first season on the staff probably takes a pretty significant hit on Marvin. Now he's bringing Hugh Jackson back in some sort of capacity, advisor to the head coach or something. We don't know exactly what his duties are. So he'll be bringing one of his closest friends in the business back to the staff, and maybe that helps a little bit. But I think it has been a taxing year. Marvin is obviously a defensive-oriented guy. He coached arguably the greatest defense in history in your town. And to be the head coach of a team that could be the worst in NFL history in yards allowed, already the first in NFL history to give up 500 or more yards in 3 consecutive games, imagine what that does to your pride when you were the defensive coordinator of the greatest defensive team ever.
No doubt about that. And, we don't argue that here, by the way. You said arguable. We don't argue that. Maybe in Pittsburgh they argue that.
Yeah, I don't argue that here either. That the Bengals knew all too well how good that Baltimore team was defensively, getting embarrassed twice that year.
Well, as much as we sit here in Cincinnati and Baltimore, we can go back and forth this week about all these things. We have to talk about Pittsburgh, right, and what's happened there and how they've sort of turned this thing around. We beat them 6 weeks ago. I walked out of that stadium at 2 o'clock in the morning. We're 3-1, just having annihilated the Steelers. And I thought, we're on to something here. It really is incredible a month later when you get back up and a few injuries and a few games and a few matchups and a few road games or home games that things change, that it should shake out at this point. But certainly the Steelers managed to figure out their defensive issues, which I think everybody in both of our cities, including Cleveland, thought, well, this will be the year the Steelers' defense isn't so good. This will be the year where you can go and score 28 or 30 on them. That has sort of stopped all of a sudden as well.
Partly due to the competition that they've been facing, but they've figured it out. And didn't you think that they would eventually? I mean, there's too much talent on that team not to be the best team in the AFC North. But if you go back to the Bengals-Steelers game, the Bengals were 4-1, and they had them. I mean, they were up with less than a minute and a half to go. All they had to do was get a stop, and the Steelers would have been in serious trouble, and the Bengals would have been in great shape. So the final minute and a half of that game at Paul Brown Stadium might have been the key to turning the Steelers season around.
Yeah, I remember watching that when that was my 50th birthday that day. The Ravens had 11 sacks that day and haven't won since, so that's where we are. Bengals coming to town this week. Dan Hoard calls all the action for the Bengals as well as the Bearcats. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Charles Newsonoff & Sons since 1923. True love comes in all shapes and sizes, and there's something for everyone's budget at Charles Newsonoff & Sons. They buy gold as well. See them in Parkville right off the Beltway at 695 and charlesnewsonoff.com, where they say, let's grow old together. Also brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast. The Kona blend in the cup, as well as the Rofo Rewards card. You can also download the app. Make sure you're using that when you pump your gas. You'll be getting your fried chicken and your Western fries free of charge. Only thing that makes it taste better is when it's free. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Dan Hoard, the voice of the Bearcats as well as the Bengals, calling all of the action here this week. Where does this leave Andy Dalton? I mean, I know we're having questions here with Flacco this week, and Marvin and whomever is going to prepare the defense this week is going to have to prepare for Lamar Jackson and Joe Flacco, because I don't think anybody's going to be letting out who's going to actually be playing this week. But for Andy Dalton and where he is there, Flacco's maligned here and has a pelt. I wonder with Andy Dalton there how long you go with a quarterback when you're not winning playoff games, let alone a head coach in Cincinnati. And I know that's the question there, but we're having those questions here as it looks like we're in our 5th out of 6 years not making the playoffs. Flacco and Harbaugh, both 11-year. Dalton's been there a while now, and I always say, give me Andy Dalton, I could go win with him. But I think that much like Joe Flacco, there needs to be a whole bunch of components around him to make him look as good as he can look.
I think that's true in Andy's case. I don't think he's one of the top 5 or 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, but he's good enough if you surround him with good talent. We saw it in 2015 when the Bengals were probably the best team in the AFC when he broke his thumb. And by and large, he's played pretty well this year. They've got 5 wins, and almost all of them have featured fourth-quarter comebacks where he has played great down the stretch. So overall, statistically, he's got 10 interceptions. Only one quarterback in the NFL has more, Sam Darnold, so that's not good. But I think he's actually played reasonably well overall. And in terms of how people feel about him around here, it's a mix, and it's a kind of a roller coaster ride, emotions swing back and forth based on how he's doing on any given day. I think the general consensus on Andy is that he probably has done better than most people give him credit for, but I would say most Bengals fans aren't sure he's capable of leading them to a Super Bowl title, whether that's fair or not.
Everyone here knows about Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlop, and for the Ravens, our kicker is still our best player, man. You know what I mean? Like, here we are for the 5th year in a row. Who's your best player? Oh, our kicker, and that's no disrespect to Yonder or Suggs or Weddle or C.J. Mosley or any. We've had trouble drafting and getting the next round of the Ed Reeds or the Ray Lewises or the Haloti Nadas or whatever. You know, for the Bengals, the last few drafts, same thing. I mean, I know John Ross was well thought of. Who is their best young player? Who's going to be the guy that 3 years from now is still on this team when maybe Marvin and Andy Dalton aren't still here and saying, well, we have an emerging player? I think that's been a problem for both of these franchises. I think it's been a problem for the Browns as well for the last 15 years.
And I think in Cincinnati and Baltimore's cases, partly because they've both been just good enough to get low draft picks. They haven't been picking in the top 5 or top 10 typically because their teams are usually at least around 500, even in the years that they don't go to the playoffs. But to answer your original question, I'll give you one on offense and one on defense. I think Joe Mixon is capable of being one of the best running backs in the NFL. I'd like to see them give him the ball more. He's averaging 4.9 yards a carry, which is right up there with anybody in the NFL. And yet they go through big stretches where they just, for whatever reason, seem to ignore him. Defensively, I think Will Jackson, who was a first-round draft pick, is one of the best cover corners in the NFL. It's hard to say that when your defense stinks, but I wouldn't pin it on him. I think he is a great young player. So they've got those 2 guys on each side of the ball, but they definitely need more, especially at the linebacker position, as I pointed out earlier.
Dan, always a pleasure to visit with you. Give my best to your tag team partner there, Dave Lapham. We'll visit with him a little later on in the week here. And I know you're busy. It's a busy time of year for you, right? I mean, you got Bearcats football and basketball and the Bengals, right?
That is correct. And how about the University of Cincinnati football team, 9-1 in the top 25 after winning 4 games each of the last 2 years? It's been a fun ride so far this year, and they will try to knock off undefeated UCF this weekend.
Well, I mean, I'll be hearing from Brad Jackson and all the rest of the Bearcat types out there, you know. We got a whole lacrosse community here of people that have sent their daughters out there to play lacrosse as well. So a little Bearcat going on out here as well. Good luck with the bear paw. We'll see you in here for some crab cakes, and bring me a little chili on the way in, all right? I'll have the cheese waiting for you, all right?
Sounds good, Nestor. Thanks.
Dan Hoard, the voice of the Cincinnati Bengals, as well as the Bearcats, joining us here. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Listen to what you want, when you want, where you want. Kids call it podcasting. We call it the buyatoyota.com audio vault. Also, our morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox at 7:01 each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. $5 down, $10 a month, warm inside and dry inside. That's the important part. And there's a Planet Fitness right around the corner from you. Learn more at PlanetFitness.com. Also brought to you by the Maryland Jockey Club and our friends at Laurel Park. We have the entries for Laurel on the front of WNST.net as well as in our morning newspaper. Get on down there and see what all the fuss is about in the newly remodeled and beautifully spacious Laurel Park Sports Bar. Get on down there and check that out. Last but never least, any breaking news, at some point the Orioles will hire someone. And when they do, you'll get it first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home. It is the SSV on WNST. Reminder, Terps and Virginia, we're going to be up at Buffalo Wild Wings in Bel Air at the festival on the 28th of the month watching basketball. That's our next big show. We're also going to be doing a Raven swapping along with our friends at Fremont Mortgage very, very soon up in Harford County. We'll have some more details for that a little later on in the week. You can always stay up on everything we're doing and on social media. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net. I am a very available individual. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.